Cageside with John Morgan.
And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Cageside with John Morgan. I'm your host, Eric McMahon. UFC 311 this week from the Dome in California, LA. I have a sneaking suspicion that I hope they keep that event and don't move it, but they haven't done it yet. I was all weekend. I was wondering, me and you are going to talk about that, John. Let's start off with that right now. John Morgan, bring you in, follow you on X, John Morgan _MMA. What up, pal? Have you heard anything like that? I was actually talking to one of the officials that is assigned this weekend, and we were talking over the course of the weekend, and he's like, man, I'm just sitting here watching the news. I'm like, is this going to get moved to Vegas?
It's interesting. I mean, that is the backup plan. As it turns out, this Saturday night, T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas is not booked. So you've got that arena open, and I'm sure the staff there and MGM and everybody would jump at the opportunity to help host the event if necessary. As of now, though, it's staying at the Intuit Dome, and I think, you know, you're probably getting awfully close to like being the last day to make a decision one way or the other, right? Because you need time. I mean, you just have to move people. You have to try to sell tickets. I mean, I understand why the UFC doesn't want to move this thing if they don't have to. I mean, you're talking about potentially millions of dollars lost and trying to rebook everything. And it's just logistical challenges. But I mean, we've seen those images out there in LA, man. It's scary. And there's already been a couple of things that were canceled over the weekend at the Intuit Dome. Obviously, you know, you've seen the NBA games being rescheduled and canceled and that sort of thing. But right now, it's all systems go. So right now, it's happening in UFC 311. It's happening in Los Angeles at the Intuit Dome. The backup plan is Las Vegas. That will be what they'll do if they have to make a change. I got to think, honestly, like today's the last day to make a call. But as of right now, everything's happening in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, I have no contextual awareness of how bad, where the logistical nightmares that these fires are creating. Like, how close is it? I mean, obviously, I don't think it's anywhere close to like downtown, like right downtown is burning. It's out in the Palisades and the hills. And if you guys have ever been out there, right, then you would know the topography. But on the other side, I'm sure this is greatly affecting travel. It's greatly affecting shipping. I mean, a lot of stuff is needing to be shipped in, and you know, depending on how early that stuff got out there, if they're still waiting on stuff, what they can source there. Luckily, it's LA, which has a big market for stuff like that, but that's where my head goes to with all of it.
Immediately, it's what you think about, and you just think about, I mean, does LA just not want extra people in the area that it doesn't need? You know what I mean? Fans coming in, staff coming in, journalists coming in. I mean, would they prefer everybody just kind of stay away and, you know, let them deal with the situation right now? I've been watching it closely, obviously. You know, from what I can tell in the maps, I think you're exactly right. Like, you look at the Pacific Palisades area, which is actually kind of northwest of Inglewood, and, you know, Intuit Dome is basically right by LAX. So if you want to use, you know, LAX airport as your point of reference as to where this thing is at, it's much further down the coast a little bit. So it doesn't seem to be imminent danger, but you do worry. I mean, things like air quality and all the smoke that's going on. And again, just the logistical roadblocks that you might be creating of whatever. I mean, is they just want not traffic on the streets or whatever. So I don't know, man. I'm really interested in this. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've had thoughts within myself. Like, should I just cancel not like going out there? Like, is it being selfish of me to go out there and take a hotel room and fly into the airport? I mean, I don't know. If the event's happening, it must mean that everybody around it feels safe and secure about it all. So I guess, you know, if they're good with it, I can be good with it. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that's being monitored. I can tell you that. And I can tell you at the UFC Apex on Saturday, those same conversations were happening where, you know, whether it be media, whether it be staff, whether it be, you know, people working the event, everybody was like, what have you heard? What do you know? What do you think? And, you know, everybody just knows, hey, T-Mobile's the backup if it happens. But as of right now, it's all systems go. So I think UFC 311 happens this Saturday one way or another. I'd probably say, I don't know, most likely it's happening at the Intuit Dome unless something changes dramatically and rapidly, and then it'll happen at T-Mobile Arena.
But just so everybody knows out there, this is not uncharted waters for the UFC. Think John Jones and decograms or whatever picograms.
Yeah.
And they were able to move an entire card on what, 48 hours notice?
No, it was a little bit more than that, but it was about a week, honestly. I remember.
But they were already out there and they had to charter a plane for all the fighters. So it was fight week.
Yeah, it was fight week. They had to switch everything around. So, yeah, and it was actually the opposite direction. It was scheduled in Las Vegas and ended up happening in Los Angeles at the Forum. This was before, of course, the Intuit Dome was built. So it was right down the road at the Forum. So yeah, they have done this before, which is, I think, one reason why maybe I don't have as much panic or concern of like, because if it was unprecedented, I think you would sit back and go like, dude, could you even do that? Like, logistically, could you make that happen? Can you make an event happen in 1 week and everything that goes with it and all the moving parts? But we've seen it, you know what I mean? So it's like, I feel less concerned about it than I guess I might had we never seen that with the John Jones situation and moving it forward, because they pulled it off before. Don't see why they couldn't pull it off again if they need to.
From a commission standpoint, do you believe that the commissions would just honor the licensing, would honor the medicals, would honor everything? I mean, listen, if this was, say, Tennessee,
yeah,
then they probably wouldn't honor all those things. But since it's the athletic commission from the state of California, which is extremely reputable, I would assume they would.
I think you're spot on with that, right? Is like these two commissions, not only do they work incredibly closely with each other, the California Commission and the Nevada Commission, but I mean, obviously just, geographically they're close. So they have a lot of exchange of officials and things of that nature because it's easy to get back and forth between the major markets. But on top of that, they're just two of the most respected commissions in the entire game, right? So it's like, hey, if Andy Foster says, these athletes are good to go, maybe I take a quick glance at it just to make sure there's nothing on there that jumps out to me if I'm on the Nevada Commission. But yeah, I think there's full faith and trust in each other that, hey, man, these are two of the top regulators in the nation, in the world, to be honest with you, in combat sports, if they're good to go. So great observation from you. I think that's another thing that facilitates it being very easy, that there's not going to be any concerns that pop up late.
Yeah, it's amazing the insight info that you get of the questions that would have to be answered just by being involved in on some of these commissions, right. At least keeping my ears open. So with that being said, UFC 311, Islam Makhachev, Arman Tsarukyan, this Saturday, 2. And I have been taking a dive into how I think that, like, have you seen the line? Let's start there. Have you seen the line on this fight?
Shocking. I to see
tell our viewers.
Islam Makhachev, and I'm looking at it right now. I want to pull up the current number to make sure I was right, but I'm seeing at DraftKings, for instance, Islam Makhachev at minus 425. I mean, a couple spots have it a little bit lower at only minus 400.
And the comeback's at what, around 300, right?
300 to 330. I mean, you can get more than 3-1 on your money for Arman Tsarukyan, who is a stud.
All right. Now that leads me into saying, I originally saw that. And so yesterday, went on my ESPN Plus and my UFC Fight Pass, and I started rewatching Arman. I said, Am I missing something? Guess what? I wasn't missing anything. This dude is a dog. He is badass. And in my humble opinion, I think he poses the biggest threat to date for Islam Makhachev and his lightweight title. Do you see anything controversial with what I said? Because I don't know what Dustin Poirier came in at, but I doubt Islam was a minus 425 with the comeback at 3 to 330.
It's amazing. I see absolutely nothing controversial with what you're saying because I completely agree with it. Maybe it's the fact that, hey, the public really does have a lot of respect for Islam Makhachev. I mean, a lot of people banging the drum that he's a true pound for pound number one, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's the win over Dustin Poirier, a well-loved, a well-respected guy. Maybe it's the wins over Alexander Volkanovski, a pound for pound great, but a pound for pound great, a division lower, 145 pounds. So, I mean, on the one hand, I'm excited to see this respect. Maybe it's the win over Charles Oliveira. That was certainly a shocking win, right? And that was one we didn't necessarily expect to go down the way it did.
Well, like the opponent, so maybe.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe it's the fact that on the one hand, I am happy to see that it seems public sentiment is really coming around on just how good Islam Makhachev is. But I was shocked.
Was there ever public sentiment that he wasn't that good?
No, I just don't know that he necessarily got through. It was always living in the shadow of Habib. Yeah, exactly, right? It was that. It was, this is Habib's guy, and I think I think now it's like, hey, that's just a part of who he is, right? And it's amazing that he's part of the Khabib lineage. He's not just that guy anymore. He's not living under that shadow at all. So I like that. But I'm with you, man. Arman Tsarukyan, I went back and watched the first fight again. Like, started going back and watching fights because, you have them in your memory and you think, but I'm like you. I'm like, wait a minute. What am I missing? I'm like, am I romanticizing that fight was closer than it was? And I went back and watched it. Hell no. It was a great fight. I mean, again, when that fight was over, there was no doubt to me that Islam Makhachev had won the fight. No doubt about it. But the rounds were close. I had it 29-28. I gave Arman round 1 at the time. Another judge, it was 230-27s, but one of the judges gave him round 2. So you're seeing how close those rounds were. And that was a 22-year-old Arman Tsarukyan who was stepping in on short notice in his UFC debut. All those factors against him. And you see how he's progressed since. So to me, I mean, an upset here does not shock me in the least. Like, these two matchups, we haven't even talked about the co-main event, and we'll get to that because that one's interesting. Well, so we'll stick with the main.
And the line on that is interesting as well.
It goes right along with this. I am so fired up for these fights. Because stylistically, these athletes, the way these matchups come together, they're fantastic. But the line in the main event will stick with down. Shocks me, and I think you're spot on in this. Arman Tsarukyan has everything it takes to win this fight, and that is no knock on Islam Makhachev at all because he's a badass. These are just two absolute studs going at it.
So usually when we break down fights, or at least when I break down fights to everybody watching this or listening, I always go from like where the quote unquote challenger has the opportunities.
Right.
And I think that's the thread. But these fighters are, in my opinion, are almost nearly clones of each other. Right. And what I'm about to say, I don't think is controversial. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Arman is the better striker.
I was interested to hear your take on this, but I absolutely do believe he's the better striker. And I think, to be honest with you, I think speed is a big part of that.
I just think he's a little more polished, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's because Islam, we always know his ground game is suffocating.
Yep.
But if we're up top, like what I know that Arman can put people's lights out, right? I know he cracks. I know he's fast. And I went back, this was yesterday, and I rewatched twice the Charles Oliveira fight. Okay? Now, I think a lot of the sentiment on Charles Oliveira got swayed because of the late Darce that was in as time expired. Like, oh, if he only had 10 more seconds. But I'm going to tell you, as a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the locking mechanism may have been there, but the submission was not. Okay? So let's start there.
Great.
So it wasn't close. Could it eventually have gotten close? Maybe. I think Tsarukyan was too good. But I say all that to say this, is that he laid in Charles Oliveira's guard pretty much every round and was never in danger.
Yes. Which
is crazy to say. Because Oliveira puts everybody in danger and nobody wants to lay in his guard. And Arman, in my opinion, won the striking battles. He was pushing Oliveira back a lot. Now, Oliveira did what he did and would crowd him. And when he would crowd him, Arman would take him down. Okay? And so I think with the speed and the ability to take down somebody down and stave off a takedown, just from that standpoint alone, minus 425 is absolutely bonkers to me. With the comeback at plus 3 to 330, that is insanity to me.
I agree with you. I really do. I mean, you're looking for opportunities. If you're somebody that likes to make a few bucks on a fight long term, you're looking for opportunities when you can cash that plus money on athletes who have a real chance. And I just don't believe that line seems to suggest that Arman Tsarukyan would be almost miraculous for him to win this. There's no chances, and I just think there's a lot of chances. And again, that is not doubting the greatness of Islam Makhachev, who has every ability to win this fight as well. But I think you're spot on with that. The speed that Arman has, the power that he has, the fact that I was actually statistically, he has a longer reach, even though he's the shorter fighter, which I found a little bit interesting as well. I don't know, if that'll necessarily play out. I don't think he's necessarily just going to try to stay on the end of his jab all night long or whatever. But I do think, and the grappling skill, the prowess that he has is unbelievable. It's not as if it's not as if if Islam even gets top position, because you talk about laying in Charles Oliveira's guard, which you definitely don't want to do. Now, Islam is not going to want to play guard, right? That's not his game. So I don't think you're going to find that. But even if Arman is underneath Islam, even if Islam is able to get the top position, which he's so good at, that smothering control, that Dagestani style that we think of. I mean, that Habib Nurmagomedov style that, of course, we think of. I mean, he has that and possesses that. But I don't think Arman is a fish out of water at that point. You're like, man, if he gets underneath, he's stuck. He's never getting out of there. His scrambles, his flows, his transitions. I mean, he's unbelievable. So, I mean, this is a very, very competitive fight. And again, it's a rematch, and we've seen how their styles come together. Now, they've both only gotten better since then. But remember, 22 years old, UFC debut, short notice. I mean, you stack everything in the world against this man, and he had it, and he performed admirably. I remember walking away from that fight going, oh, remember this guy. He's going to be around for a while. So the fact that they've now come together this many years later with the title on the line, I love it, man. I love it. This fight is high level. And to your point, I just find the odds crazy.
The next thing outside of just where, I was hoping in some way that you were going to be like, no, Eric, you're wrong here. But I just don't think we are.
I just can't. I just can't. Yeah.
Here's where I think the biggest threat lies for Arman, where he has the path to victory. I can't recall, but I've seen Islam on his back once. It's the only time I can recall is against Volkanovski, when Volkanovski kind of hit him. Everybody thought it was like a real knockdown, but in my opinion, it was tired. It was a slip, and the connection made, and he immediately pulled guard, and Volk started raining down. Now, you can look at this two ways. That was in their first fight, by the way. You can look in this two ways. It's either he didn't really necessarily try to get up. He was more in the covering up phase, and that may have been because there was 15, 20 seconds left in the fight. He thought he had secured it. Let's ride it out. Or you could look at it the other way. What is going to happen if he gets on his back? Because what I can tell you is Arman, he reversed Charles Oliveira a couple times, and he took him down a few times. So I think with his speed and his power could push Islam back. And when that happens, when he's covering up high and changes and takes down, do I think he can take him down? I do. I do think that he can take down Islam Makhachev. I don't think he can take him down late. The one knock that I saw in that Charles Oliveira fight is that he did look winded in that third round. His speed and his power were diminished. But
yes,
he is looking in amazing shape right now.
It's so funny because that's what I wanted to point out to you as well, because that is my thought process on this as well, is that I think he's most dangerous early, right? Like, he can crack. He's got the speed advantage. He's not going to be intimidated by the grappling. Sometimes if you're concerned with your opponent's grappling, all of a sudden your striking diminishes, right? Because you're so worried about making sure your stance is low, making sure you're ready to sprawl. He doesn't have to worry about that, right? Because he's like, I know I'm good if we go to the ground. Therefore, I can strike on you. And I think that's going to be early. But late has been the concern throughout his career, right? Even in their first matchup, he was fading a little bit late. Islam, who we know has insanely difficult weight cuts, who we know, comes down from a heavyweight to make this limit. You would expect that maybe he's going to fade a little bit late, but in his career, he's shown he's pretty strong throughout it, right? Arman has shown the propensity to fade a little bit, but those social media posts, my God, man. I mean, this dude could go out and win some Mr. Olympia stuff right now or something. You know what I mean? The bodybuilding content. So he looks to be in phenomenal shape. Will that change? We don't know, but that is a question mark. So, if you look at the implied win percentage of the odds, and it's basically like they're giving Arman like about a 23% chance of victory. I feel like it's higher than that, but I do feel if it goes late round 3, late round 4, round 5, now you're talking, okay, Islam has probably weathered the storm, and now he's going to be taking over. So I think those first 10 to 12 minutes, man, that's when Arman has really, he's got to try to make it happen then. I think that's his best opportunity for winning this fight.
I agree. Now, I think for Islam, I got to go back to like most recent fights, right? And right. So I'm going to keep going back to the Oliveira fight, because in the Oliveira fight, early on in round number 1, Arman, I don't know if it was from a shot or if it was some clinch position, but Oliveira locked up the tightest guillotine on him, jumped guard, then went mounted guillotine. And it showed me, Arman Tsarukyan ain't giving up. He will not give up, because that thing was so tight. His pants were coming down. He was trying so hard to get out to release the guard a little bit. But I just think that if Islam is on top, I find it hard to believe he might be able to get up, but is he going to be able to reverse position? I find that extremely hard for me to comprehend that could happen, because that's what he did with Oliveira. That changed the tide, right? In round number 1, he got on top, started throwing some elbows. He cut up Oliveira in that. And it wasn't because he got out of the submission and then got up and got the takedown. He reversed position. He swept him, which is extremely tough to do, especially against the high level black belt like Oliveira. I just don't think you're doing that to a Dagestani wrestler, catch wrestler like Islam. So I think this could honestly be a battle of whoever gets on top first and early in the round.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. And it would be interesting to see, because if Arman Tsarukyan finds himself on bottom, I would be really interested to see what his team is saying, right? Because at that point, I do think you're right. I think obviously number 1, defend submissions, but it's not that I don't think Islam is a submission threat, but you look at the guys he submitted, most of them you would consider kind of strikers by nature. You wouldn't consider like elite, other than Charles Oliveira, which that's the one that's out there that you're like, but that's the one that we all went, damn, like I didn't expect that to happen. But you look at, like Dan Hooker, Thiago Moises, Drew Dober, you don't consider them elite level grapplers, not to the level of Arman Tsarukyan. So you're all right about that. But yes, I actually think that's a very, very astute observation, is that if you're on your back, of course, be worried about the submission, but I would not necessarily be putting all your eggs into the sweet basket. You know what I mean? I would just be looking to shrimp out, hip, escape, create a scrap, create something that allows you to utilize that speed, because that speed he has that speed in scrambles and transitions as well, right? It's not just speed on the feet. We're not just talking about fast hands, that sort of thing. It's like he just moves incredibly well. So I would absolutely
look what he did to Dariush.
Yeah.
No other example. Like, the guy is fast and great everywhere.
Listen, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm picking against Islam Makhachev here and like, oh my God, but I think
we're picking against the line is what we're doing. We're
exactly.
We're giving you the reasons that plus 425 is bonkers. With the comeback at plus 300, it's bonkers.
Yes, because if you maybe haven't been watching Arman Tsarukyan's rise, right? If you haven't necessarily seen everything he's had, he hasn't been on a lot of pay-per-views. Maybe you're that fan that only shows up, for the big fights. I only watch the big pay-per-views. I'm not tuning in every Saturday night on ESPN Plus. Completely understandable, right? So if you've only seen the pay-per-view fights, you haven't only seen a lot of Arman Tsarukyan. So if you look at that line, you may look at it and be like, who's this chump they got lined up for Islam, man? They just found somebody else. No! This is the number 1 contender in the division right now for a reason. And again, the history that they have, I always think the history, especially with somebody like Islam, is beneficial too, right? Because you know what that strength feels like. You know what I mean? Like, you see that guys used to hear it with Habib a lot, right? Like, guys go in going, oh man, I know he's strong. But then they would get out afterwards and be like, oh my God, like I thought I understood. I've never felt that before. Nobody has ever held on to me like that. But you've got that, and you've got 15 minutes of it. You're like, oh, no. I know where his strength is. I know where his you're familiar with it. Nothing's going to intimidate you. Nothing's going to surprise you. There's no concern. So I feel like this is a live dog. I feel like this is, as you said, I think you nailed it right. This is the most legitimate threat Islam has faced in his title reign thus far, and I'm surprised the line is sitting where it is right now.
I don't want to give any predictions, but do you see like an ebb and flow of how this fight could go?
I do, because I really do feel like Arman is going to be an incredible threat early, man. I just think that he's going to be faster than Islam. I think that he's not going to be controlled by Islam. I think that he's got hands and striking that is going to cause Islam some problems. Not that Islam's striking isn't good. He's got power as well. He's shown that. But I feel like Arman is going to have some very good moments early on where you're going, ooh, oh, you know what I mean? Where he's in trouble. Now, that's when Islam's heart is going to get tested. He's got that. It's not like there's any question there. But, things happen. You get caught, you get clipped, you zig when you should have zagged. I mean, that's what this fight game is all about. And Arman is a submission threat in those grappling exchanges as well. So I do feel like this fight honestly favors Arman early and Islam late.
Yeah, I mean, if I was Khabib, which I'm not, I would be telling Islam, like, we have to initiate the clinch as fast as humanly possible in every round. Like, it's almost like, you watch the Kimbo Slice documentary in Boston. Yeah. Just told Kimbo to go like this and run towards him. Like, almost do that. Like, let's just initiate this clinch, right?
Yeah.
Because if I'm just going to hypothesize here, I think that Islam is going to be the bigger, stronger guy.
Yes.
Absolutely. And that is going to wane the gas tank. When the arms are filled with lactic acid, then the punches aren't snappy. They're not as powerful. They're more labored. That's where the worry is. And so let's test out these grappling exchanges early. You may get taken down, but I'd rather you get taken down which I think is going to be hard to do, but I think it is possible. But I'd rather you get taken down and scramble up and use what you've been doing since the age of 5.
Right.
Than testing it on the feet, right? I just think that is such a scary proposition early. And look at what he did to Dariush. Look at that fight. That was crazy.
That was unbelievable, man. That was one that none of us saw. I mean, 64 seconds to get it done against a perennial top contender in Beneil Dariush, flexing that power. So I feel like there's going to be a lot of danger early, man. I really, really do. And Islam is phenomenal. And that's why I'm so fired up about this fight, man. I just, I was watching the countdown last night. I tweeted out afterwards. After watching the full thing, it's just like, man, these 4 athletes at the top of this card are just as good as it gets, man. Like, and you add the extra storyline. Like, if they didn't have the history, it would still be a phenomenal fight. But there's a little bit of a storyline that adds to it as well with this rematch. And so it's like it's not these crazy bitter rivalries, but it's just intriguing and interesting, man. So I'm just so excited for these 2 matchups. By the way, shout out to I'm glad you worked in the dark side of the cage there, reference with that Kimbo documentary, man. I enjoyed the debut episode. It's funny because after that episode was over, and I want to encourage everybody to watch. It's on Vice TV, which I'll be honest, I didn't know I had, but it's in like my basic DirecTV cable package. Mm-hmm. So you might have it and not know you have it. It was funny when it was over. I was like, damn, I wish it could have been longer. Like, there was so many stuff they just kind of had to gloss through because his story is so incredible and so amazing. But I think that's just because we're so hardcore, right? Like, I watched all the Dark Side of the Rings, and I don't know that much about wrestling. And I'm sure there were some of those who were like hardcore wrestling fans, like, bro, they could have done 2 hours, 3 hours, but you have to draw a limit somewhere. But shout out to them, man. I love that series is debuted.
Not to get off topic, the only one thing is I was trying to tell my wife, when John McCarthy was saying how tired they were against Dada 5000, Dada 5000 nearly died from that.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Like, he was sedated for a month. Like, he had complete renal failure. Like, all his organs shut down. Like, that was wild. Insanity.
Yeah, they could have spent more time because that whole thing was bizarre. So yeah, they could have spent a lot of time talking about that too because that was crazy.
But that's what led to them finding out about like how bad Kimbo's heart was. But what people don't know is what that did to Dada 5000.
Yep, it was. You almost had 2 people that go that night. I'd be insensitive, but I mean, it was that bad. It was that bad. Both of them had those tattoos.
It was that bad. You know what? And truth be told, because of that fight, and I know what happened because of that fight to both athletes, I ref exhaustion a lot different now.
Interesting. Really factoring in concerns for overall health.
100%, 100%. I really do, because then there's been a couple other things where exhaustion has led to complete shutdown of organs, and a kid will die in a couple days. That has happened. And I look at it like, you can't even physically keep your hands up, then you're not physically defending yourself. You know what I mean? That's almost the way I will look at it. Now, at like a UFC level fight, there's a lot more leeway in that.
Right.
But in an amateur fight and whatnot, if you have the heart, but you don't have the faculties there, and you're still on your feet and you're so tired, it's like, I'm not going to let you die over this. Like, I'm not
100%. And, I always say, especially in the amateur fights, like, dude, I will never question a referee about a stoppage in an amateur fight. You know what I mean? Like, early stoppage, who cares? Like, these dudes got jobs to go back to. They're learning. This doesn't even count. You know what I mean? Like, this is all about experience. So in that situation, but even in the early professional ranks as well, right? Because like you said, man, especially at that level, like, what kind of weight cut did they have? You know what I mean? Like, what did they do to their bodies 24 hours ago? Now you're watching this exhaustion, and you have, like, organs start to shut down and stuff like that. So, I know everybody wants to be given every opportunity, and at the UFC level, the highest level, I mean, we had look at that in this fantastic UFC card we had this past weekend at the Apex. There were a couple fighters that were a little frustrated with stoppages that happened along the way, and I get it at the highest level, but man, at the developmental level, man, you got to really be careful with that. And it's interesting that it was that fight that really brought that to your attention. It was, man, the Kimbo Slice story. If you didn't live that time, like, I thought they did a great job telling the story, but I just almost don't even think, unless you're around her, then you can understand what a big superstar Kimbo was.
Oh my gosh.
You know what I mean? Like, even though, and nobody would ever sit there and tell you that he was one of the best fighters in mixed martial arts history, because he wasn't. But he was absolutely one of the most biggest superstars in the sport, in the history, to this day, still one of the biggest superstars in the history of the sport. And to this day, one of the coolest dudes behind the scenes, like, the least he's just this gruff, big, tough dude. You thought he'd be a jerk. He was the coolest, sweetest guy. But man, unless you're around, like, I almost don't think you can process how big of a star he was. It was crossover mainstream appeal.
I love how his son said that he used to get put in the front of the basket on the bicycle as a baby. Like, yeah, that seems like, right? It seems like something that Kimbo could get away with. And let's not mention the Jorge Masvidal came out of that whole thing as well.
Isn't that wild? I mean, backyard brawling. Not only did you get Kimbo Slice, you got Jorge Masvidal out of there too.
Yeah. Anyways, let's get back to 311. So either way, I'm not telling. I still think Islam is the favorite, right? Yes. I think I'd put him at around a 160 if I were to make the line, minus 160, right? Based on the track record. But if anybody out there is saying, John, Eric, you guys are crazy, go watch the Beneil Dariush fight, and then go watch the Charles Oliveira fight, and then come back and tell me we're crazy for thinking this line is that.
And I'm telling you what, man, I'm looking at, I always like to say, I like Best Fight Odds, man. I think it's a great website. But they had the line opening at minus 218 and bet all the way down to minus 415. That had Arman Tsarukyan at plus 180, bet all the way up to 310. So that just goes to show you, at least the odds makers in the early days of this thought like we did, agreed with us, and the public has a different sentiment about it. So we'll see how it plays out, man. I am pumped up for this, and I'm as pumped up as I am for the main event. I might.
Let's go.
There's sometimes when you have two title fights on a UFC pay-per-view event where you're like, that second title fight's all right, but it's the main event. No, sir. This is two of the highest level title fights in any UFC pay-per-view event you will ever see. And I am as fired up for Merab Dvalishvili versus Umar Nurmagomedov as I am for the main event. And I'm equally shocked by the wagering line. Once again, I'll look at DraftKings and tell you that what I see right now, the champ, Merab Dvalishvili, plus 260 as the underdog. The challenger, Umar Nurmagomedov, minus 325 as the favorite. And again, I'll say,
what did it open?
Interesting there. Same thing. Merab was a dog, but he was a plus 140 dog, and the public bet it all the way up. And same thing. Nurmagomedov opened as a favorite, but a minus 170 favorite, and now that's doubled at minus 340. And similar to the main event, I will say I feel a lot more comfortable about the opening line here, and might even say pick 'em. Might even say Merab as a slight favorite. I don't know.
I would.
Right? I mean, pick 'em.
I'm about to go on let's go on a journey together here, right?
All right.
So
let's do it.
Okay, at a minus 325 favorite, you have, let's take their last 5 fights. Umar Nurmagomedov beat Corey Sandhagen by decision. Bekzat Al-Makhan by decision. Ronnie Barcelos by body kick. Nathan Manis by decision. Brian Kelleher by rear naked choke. Let's contrast that with Merab Dvalishvili. All right, I got to load it up.
A little different. This will sound a little bit different when you start naming
these
off.
I don't know. Yeah. So my other computer is running a little bit slow. If you got it in front of you, why don't you just read off? I would love for you to read off the last 5 opponents.
Yeah. You might have heard of some of these guys. I mean, Sean O'Malley, obviously, we always remember that at the Sphere. I mean, unbelievable to win the title. But in order to get that title shot, the previous 4 opponents that Merab Dvalishvili had to take out include Henry Cejudo, Peter Yan, Jose Aldo, and Marlon Moraes. I mean, last 5, it's not even close. And I mean that is no disrespect. I mean, that Sandhagen performance by Nurmagomedov, I mean, that was scintillating. That was a phenomenal performance. And Sandhagen is an incredible fighter, but he's not a former champion. He's not a future Hall of Famer, not yet. He's still got a lot of time left to fight. Bekzat Al-Makhan, let's not forget, great win, making his debut, actually tagged Umar Nurmagomedov in that fight. So there was a little bit of a trouble spot there for Umar against Bekzat. So I'm not sitting here trying to doubt the greatness of Umar Nurmagomedov, because if you remember, look, for months, you and I have been saying, I mean, before Merab fought Sean O'Malley, you and I both were saying, look, I mean, this is a great fight. We know Umar's next. Wouldn't it be fun to see Umar and Merab? Because we know how good Umar is. And stylistically, I love this fight. So I'm not trying to discount Umar Nurmagomedov one bit. He's not just, because he's got that last name, everybody gives him respect.
But I think it speaks to that last 5 opponents. I think it speaks to who won't fight him more than
absolutely. That's it. Nobody wanted to fight him because he was down low in the rankings at that time, right? And they knew, everybody knew the risk isn't worth the reward. I'm not fighting number 14 right now, because number 14, for all intents and purposes, probably should be 2 or 3. He just doesn't, he hasn't had the ability to win yet.
And it's going to be a miserable existence in the fight. It's going to be a miserable fight.
And the training camp's going to suck because I'm going to have to wrestle all day, every day, and I don't want to do that. So absolutely. And man, and look, so the matchup, and I'll let you get to breaking it down in just a moment, but I'll present as well. And I love the storyline here too, right? Because Umar is the guy that's kind of been a little bit under-respected or under, he hasn't been given those opportunities. Merab was that guy too, and I'll say it straight out. I've been a Merab Dvalishvili fan since the day he came to the UFC. Just his personality, his work ethic, everything about the man I'm a big fan of. But even I, as a Merab Dvalishvili fan, was a little bit surprised when he was like, I don't know about Umar yet. Maybe O'Malley deserves the rematch. Maybe Jan deserves the rematch. And that might have all been some mental gamesmanship. But part of me was like, hold on, man. You were that guy that wasn't getting
off about it. Like even this week.
Yeah.
He's still pissed off about it. He's still chirping.
He is. So I was a little bit surprised at that. But I love the fact that he's like, nope, fine. You guys say Umar's the guy. You guys say that's the one. Let's go. And, dude, this fight, again, and it'll have a lot of shades of the breakdown of the main event as well. I mean, I think stylistically there's a lot of similarities between these two matchups. But what is undeniable is that these two athletes are just as good as it gets. I mean, these are 4 of the best mixed martial artists on the planet. You know what I mean? And so when you get that high level, I am as fired up for the co-main event as I am for the main event. This is a phenomenal 1-2 punch on the title fights here.
So with the records that we just listed, or the last 5 opponents. Now, let's not forget, Merab 18-4, Umar 18-0. Okay. But I think we're definitely going to say that Merab definitely had the harder road to the title challenge than eventually winning it than Umar has to the title challenge. But for no other reason other than what we've seen Merab do against that highest level talent and what we've seen Umar do The line blows my freaking mind again.
I know. I know. It's and again, is it that last name? Is it the performance he had against Sandhagen? Is it maybe people love Sean O'Malley so much and they don't like Merab now because of that? I don't know, because again, the odds makers open this thing up in a much more conservative fashion, right? And one that even I might argue, even that one could have been flipped a little bit, but the public sentiment is clearly in favor of Umar, and it shocks me a little bit, to be honest with you, man. And I don't know, again, is it the name? Is it the last performance? Is it the Sean O'Malley factor? I'm not sure, but it shocks me.
So I look at this as like the grappling is going to define everything in this fight.
Yes.
To me, I think these guys are too fast, too high energy for anyone to really get cracked hard. It's going to be, I almost view this as, it could be one of the wildest, chaotic fights we've ever seen, or it could be one of the boringest fights we've ever seen. And I don't know, right? But I'm almost envisioning it. Is it's just going to be like, on Charlie Brown when two people would get into a fight and it was just a dust cloud. And it's like, I envision it like that. Here's going to be the tell for me. Can Umar keep up with the pacing of Merab Dvalishvili? That's it. Because I've never seen Umar in a lot of trouble where he has to, pick up the pace, or he needs to alter his course of the way he wants to fight. Merab does that to every single person he fights. I have not seen him not do it yet, right? So, with that being said, can Umar keep up with that pace? I mean, when Merab is taking down an Olympic gold medalist wrestler at will and melting Henry Cejudo under the pace and under the pressure, that says one thing to me. The potential for him to do that to any single human his size in the world is there, including Umar. Now, Umar have the skills to change that? That is the question.
I think you're absolutely spot on again with that assessment. I feel like Merab, I mean, we talk a lot about, guys that have pace, that have cardio, that, if they drag you into deep waters, it's difficult. Merab is literally like the alpha male of that. You know what I mean? Like, he is the example, more to me than anybody else in all of mixed martial arts, of a guy that literally will not get tired. Like, oh man, the opening 5 minutes, he shot 7 times. You know what I mean? Like, can he keep that pace up? No, yeah, he can. Yeah. He absolutely can. He can do it for 5 rounds. He can do it for 10 rounds. He can do it for 50. It's insane what he can do. There is never a second to breathe. There's never a second to think. There's never a second to reset, recalculate. There's none of that. He's going to have pressure in your face at all times. And I do think it's going to be like that. It's going to be like that. Those kind of crazy, scrambly, wild fight, Peter Griffin and a chicken just going at it. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's going to be nuts. But Umar is skilled. And Umar does have – I think it's interesting what you said, because I hadn't thought about that much, about the speed and the pace being – so much, because I do think Umar, again, we talk about maybe who's like the more polished striker. I do think Umar is probably a little bit more polished. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. 100%.
But I think you are right. But not that. Do I think that he's the type that, dude? Oh my God, you better watch out, because if he lays it on, I mean, he doesn't have like a track record of knockouts. But
it's also the way that Merab fights. He doesn't stand in that range. He didn't stand in that range against O'Malley, and O'Malley has twice the range, right? And so he would be out or in, all the way out or all the way in. And when he's all the way out, he's circling and circling and circling till he finds his angle, and then he's all the way in. And so the reason I say, like, I think that the speed and whatnot for both of these guys, I just think it's going to be very hard to catch either one of them on that entry and on the way in.
I think you're spot on. I hadn't thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right about it. So I think that is a revelation to me, and honestly, a revelation that makes me lean more towards Merab, because I would think that's an advantage that Umar has that's kind of being taken away at this point, because I don't think you're going to have a whole bunch of meaningful strikes. So yeah, man, I love this. I'm shocked by the line as well, because this is a fight where I would say, very similar, right? Where, like I said, there's shades of the main event and the co-main event where I honestly favor the champion here. Even though he's a massive underdog here, Merab Dvalishvili, I favor him slightly because I feel like his grappling is as good as Umar's. His pace is unmatched in all the sport. And I love what you laid out there in terms of look who he's done it against, right? I mean, look who he's been in there with the absolute best of the best. He's been battle tested and seasoned against the absolute legends of the game, and he's got it done. And I don't see he's not going to be intimidated by the moment. He's not going to be just all these things. He's not going to look over and see Habib in the corner and like it's going to shake him. Or I mean, it's just he's been there. Fought at headlining the Sphere. I mean, all those things. But in much the same way that I look at Arman Tsarukyan as having a very realistic opportunity to beat Islam, I do believe absolutely that Umar has a very realistic chance to beat Merab. But to me, I would have probably looked at this. If you're just saying in a vacuum, the public's not going to bet on it, I just need you to lay a line for me, I'd probably say, Merab as a slight favorite, a minus 130, a minus 150, somewhere in there.
I fully expected Merab to be like a minus 110. 115 favorite. That's what I thought until I looked at this line. I was like, holy smokes. Now, here's what gives me pause on saying all that, where I think Umar, especially being the Khabib lineage and everything. Do you recall what happened in the first minute of the first round of Henry Cejudo and Merab Dvalishvili? Do you remember what happened in the first round, in the first minute of that fight?
Cracked him early, right?
Henry Cejudo took down Merab and made it look easy. And we were both like, whoa, we didn't see that coming like that.
Yep.
So what that tells me is that if a guy has that highest level technique behind it, which I think Umar has it. I mean, we've seen it in Sandhagen. We've seen it his whole career. I think he has that. If he can replicate that, what I think the Henry Cejudo is the pace was weaponized against him after that. So now it's that's why I said the pacing and all this, right? If Umar can handle the pacing and then can replicate that high level technique, because let's be honest, Dvalishvili, he's getting his takedowns by pure attrition a lot of the times.
Correct.
So if Umar can handle that pacing and keep that high level technique like Khabib did his entire career, that's how that fight gets won by Umar Nurmagomedov. Yeah,
I would agree. And to add some stock to that point, I mean, you're talking about, I believe at that point would have been a 37-year-old Henry Cejudo, who is no question an elite athlete, but time catches up with everybody. You know what I mean? Especially somebody who's been training in martial arts and at high levels, back to his wrestling days. Like, I mean, the body just gets miles on it, right? Meanwhile, Umar's walking in here at 29 years old, just turned 29, what you would consider to be the athletic prime for an individual. I don't think, Merab at 34, I'm not really all that worried about time catching up with him. Like, this dude is just an absolute freak of nature. The pace is unbelievable. But I do think that is a very astute assessment because, and I think you hit on it right, is that Merab's takedowns are basically just attrition and volume related. You know what I mean? Like, persistence gets it. It's not necessarily that he has the best technique. You don't look at him and say that dude's shots are just on a different level than anybody else. It's just that you're not going to get, and he'll reshoot and he'll reshoot and he'll reshoot and eventually he'll get you off balance. But if you do everything right, if you do everything like you need to do, then you can address it. So that is a good spot. And again, I think that's what makes it such a competitive matchup, man. I'm telling you, man, I can't say I'm more excited for one fight than the other. And like I said, I think a lot of times when there's two title fights on a card, you're really looking forward towards one of them. And you're glad there's a second one. It's always good to have a second championship fight, but you're really, really fired up about one. That's not the case in this one, man. I am geeked about both these fights.
I am as well. And I don't bet on fights because of my relationship with athletic commissions anymore.
Right.
But I know which way I'd be laying if I was. Just saying. I'd be taking flyers all day long.
Well, and I mean, listen, there are certain situations too, right? Where you're like, hey, man, I'll give you Merab Dvalishvili at plus 260. Like, I don't even need to hear who the opponent is, right? You know what I'm just saying? Like, what? You'll give me Merab at plus 260. Are you saying you'll give me almost 3-1 on my money against the reigning bantamweight champion of the world, the dude that is on this insane win streak, the dude whose 2 losses in the UFC were highly controversial. I mean, unbelievable.
Well, let me ask you this. What would you say if you could get Arman against anybody at plus 300?
Same thing, right? You're right, man. Like, it's so
or
true,
plus
man.
330.
Yeah, like I don't even care if it is Islam. You're giving me 3 times all my money for that. Like,
Dude,
I agree with you. And like you said, I always feel a little bit weird about wagering advice because, again, for the longest time, you know, I don't know. I know a lot of reporters do and stuff, but I just feel like it's weird, you know. So I never did for the longest time when I was working for MMA Junkie. And like you said, you as a referee, you're not gonna gamble, obviously, on mixed martial arts, but it's just you still look at it and you observe it and you go, man, I don't know that that's indicative of the competitiveness of this fight or the abilities and the likelihood of victory. So I'm pumped up, man. And that, by the way, is just the top 2 fights. The title fights are spectacular, but this is a good card. So this is a good card.
We spent 50 minutes on 2 fights. Now let's take 3 minutes for the whole Kimbo talk. Right. So it's called 47 minutes on 2 fights. Out of this main card, I think I know where you're going to go. But what fight are you most excited for on the main card?
Oh, all right. So, I mean, I got to answer this as one, but it's weird because I could make a case for all of them. I guess I would say Honestly, I'd say Prochazka and Hill. Yuri Prochazka and Jamal Hill, just because of the ranking.
My God, your boy
well, hold on, but that's what I'm saying.
I'm going to text him right now.
Well, listen, I mean, from a personal perspective of like, I mean, I love me some Renato Moicano and I love me some Beneil Dariush. Now, obviously, I've called fights with Renato. Anytime I've called fights with somebody, I got a special bond with them. But Beneil Dariush is just is one of literally the nicest dudes on the planet. So from a rankings perspective and a light heavyweight title picture perspective, because, you know, it looks like Alex Pereira, Magomed Ankalaev is going to be next. Prochazka and Hill is kind of like probably should be waiting in the wing. So from that perspective, I guess I'm interested in that. Jamal Hill has become such a heel lately that
such a lightning rod right now.
Oh my gosh, he's just absolute. I mean, the heat, right? I mean, to borrow the pro wrestling term, I mean, he's got the heat. Meanwhile, Yuri Prochazka, I mean, the samurai, incredible. So for that reason, but yeah, from just a personal perspective, Renato Moicano, Beneil Dariush. That's why I said I could make a case for all of it.
I can't unsend the text message now, John.
It's already sent. You can't take it back. I'm sorry, Renato. You don't know this guy. He's like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I'll reach out to him, let him know. But then also, listen, I like Rainer Derridio a lot, and I think he's a very, very fun fighter. And Kevin Holland, obviously an incredible fun fighter. So I'm interested in that because if Kevin Holland sprawls and brawls and then refuses to engage on the ground, he's going to make it very tough for Rainer Derridio, who is an elite level grappler but not the best striker. But Kevin Holland has a tendency to sometimes just have fun, you know what I mean, and
put him the opposite of what he should.
Yeah, and so like I could completely see Kevin Holland be like, all right, let's go grapple. Like I know you can't hurt me, so let's go grapple, and that could be difficult. So I'm excited for that one because I believe that Holland and RDR could be some chaos in there, man. So a fun, I mean, just a 5-pack of fights that should be a lot of fun.
I'm interested to see the Yuri and Jamal Hill fight the most, and from the standpoint of I think it's going to be ultra traditional, you know, really polished striker in Jamal Hill versus a highly unorthodox guy who's willing to walk through a lot of things in Yuri Prochazka. But Yuri Prochazka has also come out and said like, hey man, these 205ers they're almost just too big. Like I may go down to middleweight. And then he's going against possibly the biggest one. So I'm anxious to see, like, do you have that ability to walk through that? But let's not forget Jamal Hill. I mean, he's one fight removed from his tear in his Achilles, and that one fight was Alex Pereira, which is, you know, lived rent free in his head every single day since. So I just think that there's so many subplots in that fight alone that I'm really interested in it. And I want to go down to the prelims, Almeida and Spivak.
I'm so glad you picked that one as one of your vote because I agree, right? I mean, Sergey is not necessarily the flashiest fighter on the roster, but he's a stud. Like, if you're elite, you got to get through him. You know what I mean? And Jailton Almeida, for the longest time, I thought was a light heavyweight who was just moving up because it was easier to take fights and didn't have to cut weight. I have now completely changed my position on that. He is a legitimate heavyweight contender, but this is a real test for him. So I love that fight as well. That one really stands out to me as one that jumps out at the card as having meaning and having impact, you know. So I love that one. And then you listen, names to remember. Obviously, Peyton Talbot seems to be like one of these guys that's on the cusp of becoming a superstar. He's kind of like this breakout. The odds in that one, by the way, I mean, minus 1350 over Henry Barcelos. I mean, that's crazy. You almost never see lines that spread out in the UFC. So you see the respect that Peyton Talbot's getting. But there's a lot of great matchups on here as well. So
but that guy's like a cheat. He's like a cheat code.
Unbelievable, man. He really, like I said, he's very, very fun, exciting, and he seems to be kind of one of these young kids that's readying himself to be a breakout star and kind of this next generation. You know, he's one of those guys that when somebody asks you, like, hey, who are the new names? Who are the guys on the come up that I need to be taking a look at? You know, this is a big moment for him. This is going to be a real opportunity to him to be, 2025 to be kind of a breakout year for him. So, Grant Dawson and Diego Ferreira on there as well, man. Those are just two. So that's high level going at it. So I'm excited for that one. Ricky Tercios on there is always fun against Bernardo Sapaz. So there's some fun. Taguero Bekov is back against Clayton Carpenter. I mean, there's a lot of fights on here that could be a lot of fun. So I'm anxious. And man, we started off. I don't want to. We're so fun, excited that I don't want to bring it back down. But obviously, what we see going on out in LA is tough, man. And I hope there's no hurdles or anything because it's been difficult to watch. I am excited to go check out the Intuit Dome as well, man. Yeah. That's supposed to be one of the premier facilities that's been built in recent years. So I'm anxious to go see all the technology that's behind that. I'm anxious to go check out Cosm. If you remember, I've talked about Cosm a little bit for a while on this show, but it's that venue that I'm sure a lot of people have seen, whether it be football, soccer, basketball, or whatever. These highlights go viral, right? Of it looks like you're sitting in this theater and it looks like you're there at a live sporting event. I mean, you get this high resolution. It's kind of like I hate to say a mini version of the Sphere because that's a lazy way to look at it, but from a construction perspective, it kind of is. And that's literally right next to this as well. I mean, they're really building out this area. And so I'm anxious to go check out that facility as well. So, knock on wood, everything it goes okay. Brave what those firefighters are doing out there, man. I know those high winds out in LA are not helping them whatsoever. But hopefully, no last second hurdles. If we do, then it'll just be a home game at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. One way or another, we're getting UFC 311 this weekend.
I mean, yeah, I think you hit it spot on at the very beginning. It's got to be today, which would be Monday at the latest tomorrow afternoon that they could pivot. And, I'm hoping they don't from a standpoint of, the infrastructure's in place. They can comfortably handle it. Displacing the fighters fight week, weight cut. I mean, there's so much that would just throw off little things, but, obviously, the people's health and possessions and everything is most important. And the firefighters and everybody getting support to those people. I think our passions, I don't want our passion to take away from the real stuff going on. So, but like I said, I think you hit it spot on today, tomorrow, early afternoon at the latest. Can they pivot? And the only reason they would be able to pivot is because both of those cities have the infrastructure to handle it as well.
Yeah, and it's not like a situation where if you're a fan, you can't make it from one city to the other. You know what I mean? It's not that long of a drive or a short flight or whatever. So even if you were
5-hour drive from LA to Vegas.
Yeah, and that's with some traffic. You know what I mean? So it's like, you as a fan, you can still be able to go and, hopefully they still take that because look, it wouldn't be easy. Let's say you dropped, for the average fan, let's say you dropped $1,000 on tickets, and now if you don't get the refund in time to lay out another $1,000 for new tickets, I'm sure they'll try to figure all that out if it happens. I mean, I don't remember the full details of how they made that work the last time around, but hopefully there's like an exchange option so you don't have to go back into your pocket or whatever. Because I know a lot of people don't have that extra income sitting around, but whatever. Like I said, I'm not worried about it just because had they never, like you said, had there been no precedent for ever doing this, I would wonder like how in the heck could they pull this off? How much will this screw up? fortunately for everything you laid out earlier, they could do it if they need to. I hope they don't have to, but if they do, we know we're still getting UFC 311 on Saturday night.
Let's go UFC 311. Islam Tsarukyan, Umar, Merab. Those are just the top two.
Unbelievable, man. What a way to start the year. What a way to start it. Again, I just want to give one last shout out to everybody that was on the fight card this past week. And obviously on pay-per-view weeks, we spend a lot of time talking about the pay-per-views because that is the big fight that everybody's watching. But this fight night card this past weekend, if you didn't tune in, it might be worth going back and checking it out, man. I mean, one of the better fight nights in recent memory, man. What a way to start that. I mean, just highlights galore, man. It was a fun night of fights at the Apex for sure.
And Mackenzie Dern is becoming a star.
She's so good, man. I look, I picked against her in this fight. I thought Amanda Ribas, her judo and jiu-jitsu was going to be enough. And it was, right? I mean, she played in Mackenzie Dern's guard for quite a bit. She had some sweeps. She did some, I mean, she looked okay. And then she wasn't. You know what I mean? And that's the danger of it, right? Mackenzie, I mean, just locked that arm bar, beautiful work on it. I mean, just beautiful transition, set it up. Mackenzie's great,
man. For her to keep that arm bar in the mount instead of just raining down and then deciding to keep it and going for it, I was like, dude, that's so high level.
And it's executing that against another black belt. You know what I mean? It's against who showed really good submission defense, right? Like, I mean, Amanda Ribas got out of several bad spots. So it's not a situation where like, well, you knew if this went to the ground, Ribas had no chance. No, man, she was dealing with it well, but Mackenzie, as you said, just stayed on it. And eventually got the submission. Much like, by the way, if you're a big fan, I don't know if you got to watch the prelims as well, but Felipe Bunis's armbar submission over Jose Johnson was fantastic as well. Another situation where like some of the highest level grappling you'll see where Felipe Bunis locks in this armbar and Jose Johnson does everything right. Counters once, counters twice, steps over, turn. He's doing everything that you're supposed to do, but Felipe just keeps adjusting, attacking, and got it. Yeah, I'd be like, all right, you got out of one, you got out of two, you got out of three, you're not getting out of four. Sorry, that's not happening. So that was great. And then you just had so many big knockouts on the main card as well, man. It was just a fun way. Heck of a start to the year for the UFC at that fight night. And on paper, man, this thing is looking fantastic at 311 as well. So great start to the year for the UFC.
With that being said, for John Morgan, I'm Eric McMahon. Enjoy the fights.